Hi, this is Marlo Balmanno, the producer of Latter-day Left. Alain and Cris Balmanno are joined by a special guest this week, Matt Gardner. They discuss everything from student debt forgiveness to the lack of good choices in Utah politics, and they also discuss if the Speaker of the House has too much power, and as always, much, much more. Remember, this is one of our last episodes. If you want to contact us, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on podbean.com. Now, on to the show.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Latter-day Left, a special edition. I'm Chris.
I'm Alan.
And we have a guest today.
Which is why it's a special edition. Introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Matt. Matt Gardner.
Matt is a listener who
wants to be on the show.
And we've told people, send us emails and comments, and Matt reached out and wanted to be on. So, see, the rest of you who wanted to be on, you didn't reach out. Now it's too late.
Maybe we extend it if we get a flood of people.
Just a reminder that we're wrapping up this podcast. So
we are. So if you want to be on the podcast, then email us at
latterdayleft@gmail.com. You can message us at latterdayleft on Twitter, and you can find us on Facebook and message us there.
Well, it's been nice talking to you. Have a good week. Oh, no, wait. We haven't heard from Matt.
That's usually the stuff we do at the end, right?
Yeah, we usually flip-flopped it.
Yeah.
So, Matt, tell us about yourself.
Okay. I am a software engineer. I work for a healthcare company. I got a degree in linguistics from BYU and then a master's degree in computer science from Utah State. I grew up in Montana, and
so there are people in Montana.
No, he moved here.
Oh, okay.
I moved here from Montana. So there are no more people.
There are no more people.
If you live in Montana and you want to send a nasty gram, you can email Alan at...
Listen, according to the president, we're full. Okay? So that means even Montana is full.
It's full.
Is it full?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
People in Montana will tell you they're full because they don't want people coming in.
But there's only 5 people left, right?
Yep. So I grew up in the biggest city in Montana. It had 100,000 people.
Is that Bozeman?
Billings.
Yep. Oh, see, I know. I apologize to you Montanians. I really have never been. One of the few states I've never visited. I visited most of the states, but Montana and both Dakotas.
There's a reason that Montana and both Dakotas...
Hey, it's a beautiful, beautiful state.
Unless there's a big animal preserve and national park. What do we call it over there? Not Yellowstone. That's in
Glacier.
There's where all the buffalo roams and the geysers and all that stuff.
That's Yellowstone.
Yeah,
that's Yellowstone. It is Yellowstone. Is that in Montana?
That's not in Montana.
That's part is in Montana.
So I've been to that part of Montana.
A little bit.
I've been to that part of Montana.
It's Wyoming and Montana.
Yeah, but I didn't go through Wyoming to get into it. I went through the Montana side. So I take it back. I have been to Montana.
I used to cross the Yellowstone River on my way to work every day.
No way.
Yeah, while I was in high school.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, so normally we sit and we've talked to people. We've told everyone we sit before the podcast and we come up with a list of topics. When you're a guest on the show, you get to pick the topic. So today's topics
are brought to you by Matt.
If any of you are upset, Matt won't be here next week for you
to
yell at him.
To Chris. So write to Chris.
All right. So let's go in. Actually, we're gonna. There's one topic on here that Matt didn't ask for.
Oh.
Our producer said we were going to talk about it.
He's always springing new topics.
The producer already put it on the list. So
she's the boss.
All right, but we'll start with Matt's topics, and we'll come around to ours at the end.
Because I really like some of Matt's topics.
So just to start off, Matt, and I have the email, but I'm not going to do it verbatim, thinks that the Senate Majority Leader may have a little too much power.
He has a lot of power, that's for sure.
So what do we do about it?
Well,
not you and me personally. We can't do anything.
So
short of illegal acts, there's not much you and I can do about it.
You've got a structure to the United States Senate, and it gives quite a bit of power to the Senate Majority Leader, which has historically the Senate has a structure in which the majority, of course, controls the agenda and controls the way things come in and out. It has often been balanced in the past with the filibuster, the idea that you needed to pull 60 votes to push something through, and that gave the minority some power, because if the majority couldn't ramp up to 60 votes, the problem that I think maybe you're talking about is kind of the other side of that coin. What if the majority leader doesn't want to bring up something? And you mentioned in your email that, for example, House
Resolution 1, yeah.
Right. Which is
the anti-corruption.
Which is the anti-corruption, the ethics in government, which passed the House with a fair number of Republican support. Mm-hmm. In fact, to be fair, they voted for it because they knew that McConnell had their back and it would never see the light of day, because the majority gets to set the agenda. And so you can't even bring something up for a vote unless you get...
What if you have something that's popular? There should be a mechanism that if you have something that's popular enough, and you just have an obstructionist majority leader like we do now, what if you get enough Republicans just to join the Democrats and say, hey, the majority of the Senate wants to talk about this. They should have a way to
right. And so the way
something on
so
the
way
floor.
That would happen, and of course you can imagine what you're talking about is to strip.
I'm kind of talking the anti-filibuster.
The discipline. No, it's to strip the discipline from the party mechanism. How does someone become the Senate majority leader? Because just like someone gets to be the speaker, people vote for that person, okay? What you're talking about is some Republicans in the Senate voting with the Democrats they would literally have to choose a different majority leader. They would actually have to join the other side because the leadership is chosen within the caucuses. Now, if you had a healthy
right, I'm saying there's
three-party system,
overrule.
If you had a healthy three-party system, well, let's say you had the Republicans were at 40, the Democrats were at 40, and which would only give you 80, and then you had 20 senators that were independents.
Let me just check that.
You do the math a little bit. Check my math.
Yeah, that works.
If you had the Republicans at 40, the Democrats at 40, and 20 independents, now you would have a broker, if you will. The independents.
You had the UK Parliament as well.
Well,
yeah.
to some degree.
Yeah.
Not the UK, because the UK is almost split in just a two-party system. They do have some minor parties, but for purposes of like the prime minister,
you'd have to build a coalition.
You build a coalition,
yeah.
And so you could get into a situation where you had if you had a third party that was viable in the United States, some of the more egregious power fights within the legislatures could be taken care of. Now, I know this is actually heresy to the American political community because we have somehow evolved into a two-party system. The fact is that when the founding fathers thought of and created our system of government, they never envisioned parties. Parties were not, you're going to say, well, they had the Whigs and they had the, those came after. There were no political parties when they wrote the Constitution. And it wasn't, and there is really no reason why there should only be two parties in the United States other than we've got 216 or 220 some odd years of history now in which we've not ever been able to organize an independent third party, a coalition third party. There's been flare-ups of independents who've run for the presidency, but there simply has not been a grassroots independent movement.
You're talking about the power structure of the Senate. What if you have an HB1 that 15 or 20 Republicans we should at least talk about this, if not be in favor of it. And they don't want to replace McConnell, but they do want to,
It won't happen. It's simple.
That's what I'm saying. There should be some kind of mechanism to force something onto the floor. McConnell can be up there and be an obstructionist all he wants. I'm talking about a reverse filibuster.
Yeah.
Where he's saying no, and they say, you know what, we've got 60 people that say, yes, we're going to do it.
That's never going to happen.
Well, I'm
because
saying there should be.
Each house gets to write their own
Because each
rule.
side wants to keep the power structure for when they're in power.
Yes.
I understand that.
Yes. Well, plus each, who's going to enforce that on the U.S. Senate? U.S. Senate gets to write its own rules. The House gets to write its own rules.
Right.
And so
I understand that. I'm just saying there should be there. I wish there was like a reverse filibuster.
Yeah,
so,
that'd be nice.
Yeah. Can we get enough people? If we could get enough, can we get 9 Republicans to say, yeah, we should talk about this and vote, and we get 60 votes, then we can force a discussion.
Yeah.
Or at least bring something up.
And I mean, there may be a mechanism, but again, nothing gets brought to a vote except through the majority leader.
Which is that. I think that was the point. Is
so? What do you think?
That's
Matt?
That's a lot of power.
What would you think about it?
Well, I think Chris is right. I mean, I think there should be a
Wait,
a
can we
way.
repeat that? Because it doesn't get said very often on this podcast.
That'll get cut.
It will get cut.
I mean, there's got to be a way, and if the Senate needs to rewrite the rules, maybe when the Democrats come into power, that's probably not going to happen.
They're never going to want to do
Or
that.
there's a groundswell of people saying, "Hey, there's enough independence that they push something."
I think
My example.
Your 40-40-20. If there were enough, then you could probably get some kind of
then you could
rule put in place that would. Yeah,
well,
we could.
You'd have to because
You'd
you'd
never
have to have a
have-
coalition. Now, here's another resolution, and I'm surprised that it hasn't happened. McConnell has been an obstructionist now for 10 years.
Longer, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been there longer than that. But
he's been an obstructionist
since Obama got elected.
Obama's first election, which is now we're going on 12.
What?
Well, no, I guess it's 10.
It's 10.
Almost 11.
It's almost 11.
See, I'm already in election mode.
Yeah, I know, right?
I'm in election mode already. Well, you got 18, 20 people running for president. So, I'm already in election mode. I'm thinking we're 2020 already.
Now, so
you're 10, 11 years.
I mean, what could have happened and should have happened and never did is move a lot more Democrats into Kentucky and vote them out.
Yeah, but Democrats don't want to live in Kentucky. If you live in Kentucky and you want,
and you have a complaint,
you don't exist. So,
well, they don't think we exist, and we live in Utah.
That's true. That's true.
Well, no, they just take us the Republicans take us for granted. The Democrats don't want to live in Kentucky. That's the difference. The Republicans say, "Yeah, Utah, that's safe."
There used to be Democrats in Kentucky.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Don't get ahead of me.
I'm not getting ahead of anything. I mean, I think the answer is that there is no single solution as long as we continue to have a system that protects states. And I know I'm saying something now that is radical because what Republicans insist on, especially in the Trump era, of course, is the Electoral College. You got to protect the states. You got to protect the ability of states to choose for themselves, and if that means that a president that doesn't get the majority of the votes gets elected, then so be it. Because we don't want democracy. We're not a democracy. We are a representative republic. And so the mechanism in the Senate where each state has 2 votes. Think about this. California, with its 16 million people, gets 2 senators, 2 votes in the Senate. Wyoming, with its less than 500,000 people, gets 2 votes in the Senate. Montana, with its 500,000 people, gets 2 votes in the U.S. Senate. New York, with its 13 million, gets 2 votes. Can you see the dichotomy there in terms of how many people each senator represents? And someone made a study and said, well, it comes out about even in terms of because even though California and New York and New Jersey, their senators represent way more people, and those are liberal states. So those are liberal votes who are underrepresented. But then you look at Texas and Florida. These are certainly big states where the 2 senators represent far more people than the small states. And yet those are conservative states for the most part in the U.S. Senate. And so when you average it out, they say, well, it's kind of average out between the conservatives and the liberals. My point is that when the founding fathers created this system, the big debate was over can a republic even function if it is a large republic? They took their ideas about republican government from the Greeks and from the Romans. And as the Romans grew, they ditched republicanism and they became an empire. You got Caesars and those. So there were far less republican tenets once the Roman Empire grew. And the argument in Philadelphia was, does a republic even work if it's large?
Large scale.
Yeah, I mean, Switzerland
they
Switzerland works.
And they didn't anticipate it getting as large as it did.
They did not.
They didn't see the 13 colonies could becoming 50 states that took up an entire continent. Sorry, Canada. Half a continent.
Well, and Mexico. Mexico's part of this continent also. But no,
there are lines to be drawn.
You're exactly right. That they never expected. And so now you have, Hawaii, which is halfway across the Pacific. You got Alaska, which, doesn't even touch the United States. I mean,
sure it does. The
through
water
Canada.
touches.
The
Water. Look, when you play Civilization, the game,
That's
as
true.
soon as you have a city with a port, you can trade automatically because you touch.
That's true. That's
Okay?
very true.
So the touches by water, and that counts.
Speaking of, I haven't played Civ in a long time.
Which is how Hawaii works, because it doesn't touch either.
It doesn't
Right?
touch anything.
It's
It doesn't
out there
touch
in the middle of
anything.
nowhere.
But Puerto Rico
doesn't
doesn't
touch,
touch
and
on the other side, but they won't.
only half the country doesn't think they count. So
Yeah, no. So it's they never had that idea that we were going to be a big republic and that it was going to work. So the experiment continues, and we have found that the experiment does not work well when you have people of bad faith. And Mitch McConnell has, for the last 12 years, been a person of bad faith. He made it very clear at Obama's first inaugural, my job is to stand in his way forever. My job was to make him a one-term president. He failed at that. And then, I mean, at the end there, when there was a year, 18 months left before the election, and Obama brought up Garland, Supreme Court Justice, McConnell says, I'm not gonna bring it forward. He has been a person of bad faith for the last 12 years.
So why do the people of Kentucky keep electing him?
Because they think it is in their interest, because he's convinced them that it is in their interest to re-elect a person of bad faith. Because, he appeals to the coal miners in Kentucky.
Are there any of those left?
No, because
Trump didn't bring back the coal.
Coal is dying of a natural death on the marketplace, and Trump tries to revive it. And it's not revivable.
Well, we've made the point before that when whale oil was going out of style, the politicians didn't get involved and say save the whale oil jobs or the whaling jobs. Okay, there was when the car was being rolled out of Detroit because Henry Ford said, "Hey, I can do this cheap and easy." The politicians didn't say, "Let's save the horse and buggy industry."
No, but not economists, but the big robber barons have always tried to buy off government. Okay, they've always
right, but at some point, progress has always
Absolutely.
overtaken the old way.
And where we are right now, is right on the cusp of that.
Well,
as coal is declining.
I'm saying not for the politicians, we wouldn't be on the cusp. The cusp was 20 years ago.
Well, the cusp might have been 20 years ago,
but the politicians have been holding us on this ledge for so long that without their interference, we could have toppled the other way.
I think it takes, I had a thought this week that somebody should run for governor. By the way, we could talk about the governor's race in Utah. It's scary. It is scary, scary, scary. The kind of people that they want to bring up forward in the Republic on the Republican side, and the Democrats just don't have anybody. And it was
it's going to be Jason Chaffetz, right?
Oh God!
Well, can I just
please?
I want to make a prediction right now. I'm going to say it. Cox is going to be governor next.
I could almost live with Cox.
I could.
Especially over Jason Chaffetz.
Let me tell you something. Cox has trouble getting through the Republican caucuses. He's too quote mild-mannered and reasonable. Now he could do what Huntsman did. He can go to UVU, which is what Huntsman did. He went to UVU and made a speech in which he just threw red meat at the right wing. And I listened to that speech and I said, oh my gosh, that's terrible. But he won over enough of the delegates. And once he had the nomination, then he ran to the middle and he was a reasonable person. They've learned their lesson. But if Cox can pull that off, it's the only way Cox gets through the Republican primary.
Well, but you can go now in Utah. You can get on the ballot with just signatures.
With signatures,
which he can get signatures.
If he can do that, If he can do that, he could win because the more moderate will win the primary, and so there's still a possibility that he could be. But that's that whole the Democrats don't have. I was thinking today, what would be my platform if I were to run for governor? One of the points of my platform would be that every public building in Utah should be producing electricity. All the schools, all the government buildings, every single public building should be required to have solar panels. And then the other thing that we would do is we would make a rule, because you've got the monopoly, you've got Rocky Mountain Power, and they're playing games with solar. They're not really intent on renewables, but they're kind of parsing it out because they're trying to drag it out, just like you say, Chris. They're trying to. I would make a rule that no government in Utah can enter into a contract to buy any power other than renewable produced power. Sure. And you have to show us that these electrons are coming from renewable energy. You want to help.
Yeah, but you don't know whether if it's coming from the coal or if it's coming. They'll say, well, half of theirs is coming from coal, half it's coming from renewable, and you don't know which one you're getting.
That's right.
So they'd have to at least be 51% solar to say, there's a better than average chance that you're getting solar.
You have to show me that we're not getting any coal electrons.
Yeah, you couldn't do that. You'd have to shut down the coal completely.
Well, then, excuse me, if you want to have our business, then seriously, if you want to push the next generation, government has to be involved. Okay? We were talking before the podcast about how science has advanced from, let's just say, the Kennedy years, how science has advanced. It was NASA. It was NOAA. It was DARPA at the military. It's been government. It was the National Institute of Health that has advanced the collective benefits of power. Because if you leave it to Myers Squibb, they're only going to research things that are going to make them a profit. And how does general science advance? It doesn't advance through that kind of research and development, which is pinpoint focus on, can we make a buck out of this? Okay? Everybody knows about the little blue pill, which is, apparently the marvel of the 21st century. The little blue pill was invented to do something completely different, and then they were testing it. I said, well, this really sucks.
It had a really weird side effect.
It had a really weird side effect, but it wasn't working for what they wanted. But they hit upon, look at the side effects. We can market this. And so all of a sudden it becomes a thing. But if it's not the kind of thing that you're going to make a big profit out of, the industry's not interested. Industry is not interested in general research, R&D for the sake of R&D. It takes a policy.
Well, no, they've left that now to the universities. 3, 2, 1. They've left that to the universities that aren't sponsored by corporate. Some of the universities have corporate sponsorship.
They do,
and they do the R&D for what the corporations want to do.
I mean, even the ones that do,
but they'll tell you, that's what universities are for. That's what the independent research labs are for. There aren't many independent research labs anymore. That follow the science no matter where it goes, just for the sake of following the science.
Which is what government does when it's got a big project, and that's how you get.
So let's lead that into the next topic that Matt brought us. Environment and climate change. The Republicans used to be big on environment.
We've said that a lot.
Yeah.
And now they've done this big flip.
Yeah, no, I set a goal for myself a couple of years ago to read a biography of every president. I just finished a couple ago. I finished Teddy Roosevelt and his big national parks push, and And you go forward to Nixon and the EPA and getting that all into place, and then Reagan, and and then all of a sudden Bush 1 comes around, and climate change is a bunk idea, but they knew about it a long time before, and they I don't know if you, I'm sure you remember, but when I was little, they outlawed CFCs. Yes. And there was a big global push because of the ozone layer problem, right? There was a big hole in the ozone, but we couldn't, if it's the same thing with climate change. We can't go outside and see climate change happening every day. We couldn't go outside and see this ozone layer problem. And so the scientific community came forward and said, hey, we've got this problem. And everybody rallied. International trade agreements happened. We all said, okay, we're not going to use CFCs anymore, and the ozone layer has almost healed itself.
That's right, exactly.
Right, and so just a few years later, the climate change scientists said, hey, we're going to have this huge problem, started presenting it, and one of Bush Sr.'s cabinet members, kiboshed, was in league with the oil companies, and by that time, they saw what was going to happen and decided to push against that. And then it became, instead of a world issue, it became a left versus right issue. And that's all history.
It's interesting because what was it? What does it say in the 89 section of Doctrine and Covenants? When it talks about
it's a big section.
A lot of things. It's a big section. when it talks about.
It's actually one of the shorter ones.
It really is. It talks about. People who have their own agendas and really talking about the designs of evil man, and he was really talking about tobacco in that section,
right? The word of wisdom,
yeah, but the warning about the design of people. One of the things that I've never been able to understand, Americans who will stand up and tell me, I'm all for freedom, I'm all from independence, I'm all for the rights of the people to do anything they want, and that's why they want small government, and that's why they don't like Washington, and that's why they don't like government. These same people will bow down to the corporate powers that are. You get no say into what corporations do. You have no say over their corporate boards. You have no say over their CEOs. You have no say over what they do, except we know that corporations live for only one thing, and that is to maximize profits at all costs. And you as the people who want to be free have absolutely no say in how corporations operate in the world. There's only one way to stop a corporation or to regulate a corporation. It is with government, which, by the way, you get to vote for the representatives of, but the same people that will stand up and say, government needs to be kept weak, but they will turn over their lives, their safety, their security to the corporations. I mean, we're seeing it in this administration. We've talked about this recently. Here, Boeing, you inspect your own planes. Oh, here, meat producers, you inspect your own pork producers. We don't want to do that as government. It's just nonsense that the people who pretend that they want liberty are willing to give up their liberty to corporate overlords.
Well, and that's why I took this as the next topic, because this idea of climate change or we don't call it global warming anymore, we call it climate change, but this idea of climate change can't be fixed without government. And like Alan was saying, right now you have and you just said, Matt, it's a left versus right issue at this point. It's not what is the science telling us?
Right.
Yes, we're all on the same page. The science says X. How do we solve for X?
Yeah.
We're saying the science says X, and the other side's saying no, that there is no science, or the science says blue.
Is wrong, or
we're not even talking about the same things anymore. Right. They're talking colors. We're talking letters. Or, and the truth's probably somewhere in between, I guess. But
yeah,
it's not, we can't agree on the topic. And if we can't, at the government level, if we can't agree on the topic, then we can't come up with the solutions.
Right, exactly. And, I've talked to some of my friends about this topic. And it, once I get to a point where I can convince them that climate change exists, then we can start talking about a compromise legislation or ideas that, I don't think that the left has everything right all the time, or the Democrats. I don't think they have everything right all the time. I think there needs to be a good mix. And I think our country is great because we involve multiple sides. On the climate change issue, it's really hard to come up with something when, we could say, yeah, the climate change exists and here's a conservative way to address it that doesn't, go into corporate profits or whatever they want to save. And then the Democrats or the left wing can come in and say, well, we want to do it this way, and then they can come up with a compromise. But at this point, we can't even agree on facts, and that's what's really frustrating to me about the whole climate change conversation.
Well, I don't even think that it's that we can't agree on facts. I think that we want to talk climate change and they want to talk corporate profits.
Right.
And it's two separate discussions that we're having. That's why I brought up earlier the whalers and the horse and buggy. When did the Republicans decide that it was their job to protect corporate profits above all? Because you see it here in Utah. They will protect Rocky Mountain Power's bottom line legislatively above
or energy solutions
or above, they'll stamp down, they will stomp down any kind of talk of renewables, any talk of moving forward. If you want to talk about air quality in the Wasatch Front during the winter, they don't, and you want to bring up, cars or, anything else. They don't want any part of that because it's going to hurt the bottom line of these corporations. So when did the Republicans come to believe it's their job to regulate for the corporate bottom line?
For the corporations. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you when. And it's something that happened starting in the 60s. It's something that happened as the Nixon era.
Yeah, because Matt was right. Nixon and the EPA,
absolutely.
The Republicans of today, the EPA would never have happened. Okay,
no, exactly.
The rivers in Cincinnati, and they'd still be on fire. Okay,
the Lake
Michigan would still be an issue.
Yeah, it's exactly.
And what happened is that the Reagan era really opened up a war on union. And what was going on in the American political landscape is you had corporations and they were giving money, and you had the unions and they had their money power and they were giving money, and they had their influence, and there began to be an all-out war to shut down the other side. And James Madison in Federalist Paper number 10 talks about, I can't remember, I don't know why, I just remembered, but I think it's in number 10. He talks about interest versus interest. And that's the way you keep the balance in under our constitutional system. You pit interest versus interest. And up until the Reagan era, there was a did you look it up?
Yeah, it's 10.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
There was union check on faction.
There you go. Up until the Reagan era, there was a balance. Now, there was a war to get there, okay? I mean, if you read about the history of the unions through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, there was a big war for the unions, for the workers to unite and to become powerful. And then in the 60s, you kind of get this parity of industry and workers. And then I think you get to what you want to get, because both sides are being heard. And beginning with Reagan, there began to be this war on unions that was relentless, because it was industry saying we can't get our way 100% of the time. We have to compromise because there's this huge power base opposing us. Let's destroy that power base. As unions have gotten weaker in this country, as workers has gotten, we talk about workers becoming weaker in this country, and we look at the comparable or the gap between CEOs and line workers, okay, which was, a factor of 10, and now it's a factor of thousands. We talk about income being flat for the lower income and for the lower middle class. But one of the other ways in which workers have gotten weaker in this country is they no longer have the power base which allows them to compete at the national level, in the Senate, in the House, in the White House, with industry. And that is why when you get government trying to say, wait a minute, we have an imbalance here, so we need to limit the voice of money in politics. And then you get the Supreme Court saying, nope, corporations are people, money is speech. The game was up. The game is up because the workers no longer have the union power that they had to counter the industry. And so if you want to know why today industry has bought government, it's because there is no, before industry might have bought some votes and the workers would have bought some votes. And you had that interest versus interest. The game has been rigged, and it started with Reagan and it has continued on to where now you have Citizens United, where the Supreme Court has said, hey, we don't care that there's this imbalance. We don't care that one side is no longer being heard. We're going to stick to some sort of idealized view of speech, and we're not going to regulate speech. Money is speech. Corporations are people. They have the right of free speech. And you have nobody to speak on the other side. That's the problem.
You know, ironically, it was Theodore Roosevelt ran on an anti-corruption, anti-business, because the corporations there. This was back in the. I mean, you think about Rockefellers and the U.S. Steel, and
that's right.
And this was all during that time. There were these huge corporations.
Those were the barons. Those were huge. Yes,
and
exactly.
They controlled all parts of government, and they controlled entire towns and some entire states, right? And so Teddy Roosevelt comes in and he cracks down on those and breaks up those monopolies. And he was a Republican. He would not be a Republican today.
He couldn't be, because he wouldn't have been bought by their side.
Right.
Again, the idea is, the founding fathers put together this thing, which is really precarious. I mean, you read James Madison. It has to be interest versus interest. And if you don't have opposing interest, the system doesn't function, okay? And what we've done is, what the Republicans have done over the last 40 years is they have systematically destroyed the infrastructure of the system. And so you're saying now, well, why is it that government now, and I think the result of it is the Trump administration, where you have in place Gadianton robbers whose only purpose is to funnel enrichment to their class of people at the expense of everybody else, who lie to the people, who lie to their own voters. I'm going to bring jobs back to West Virginia. How are you going to do that? There is nobody buying the coal.
Believe me.
I'm the only one who can do it. But it's a big lie, because there's nobody really buying the coal. Even if you say, okay, you know what? We're going to pull all the regulations from the coal industry. There are not enough people buying coal anymore. So I really think, but I do think that if you want to move it forward, government can move it forward. And the smart people, the people who are industrious, will start companies that take advantage of that. Okay? If Salt Lake City were to say, we're going to put up powering stations at every parking spot in the city, and we're going to let you, if you're driving an electric car, we're going to let you charge for free, and we're going to buy our power from the Nevada Power Corporation that is all solar. Let's say there was something like that. And so that it knew that we were going to provide free power electricity to all the electric cars who park in Salt Lake City. You would see a change in the air quality in Salt Lake over a very short period of time.
Would you?
Yes, I think you would.
I don't know that you would. I think the mindset in this area, that might work in California.
It might.
I don't think it would work here. You're going to have the guys, I'm not giving up my 2-ton Chevy pickup that blows black smoke when I step on the...
No problem.
But we're
going to tax the heck out of it.
They never passed that. You can't pass new taxes here in Utah.
Not at the legislature, but you can at Salt Lake City. You can at the city level.
You can at the city level.
You can at the city level. And
I tax the gas? Is that where
I think
tax the gas.
You need to be very careful.
Tax the pollution.
I think you need to be very careful, though, because a lot of businesses are already leaving Salt Lake City, 4 Point of the Mountain and Lehigh in that area.
That's good.
They're coming down the valley.
You know why?
And you're never going to get Sandy to do that. You're never going to get Lehigh to do that.
Yeah, I think you will. Maybe not Lehigh. I don't know. But by the way, it's a good idea. to spread the businesses.
I'm not saying it's not.
Because if you spread the businesses, more people are living closer to where they're going to work.
I think that businesses should be spread out, and people should be able to live closer to where they work.
People should live closer to where they work.
Yeah. But at the same time, you don't want
look,
Salt Lake City to kind of be. You don't want all of Salt Lake City to become the gateway. It was there, people went, and now it's kind of a ghost town because they built City Creek, and no one wants to go on that side of the city anymore.
No, wait a minute. It's being renovated. It is recreating itself into something very different at the gateway, and that's part of. Look, I'm sitting here defending the free hand of the marketplace, which is an unusual position for me to be in, right? Because that's certainly not what I believe in necessarily. But the government impacts the economy. Government impacts industry. And for people to say, let the marketplace alone, well, okay, Mr. Republican, I'm sure happy to let the marketplace alone, but stop supporting one half of the marketplace.
But I was going to say, they don't really believe in the pure free hand of the market.
Of course not.
They believe in the pure free hand of the market as long as the deck is stacked for their businesses. They don't want... Because if you had the pure free hand of the market, we'd have more electric cars that are cheaper than what Tesla and Toyota are selling them for. Okay? You'd have... They wouldn't be toys for the rich, is what they are at this point. You would have...
And that's what I'm talking about.
Making
it available to the masses.
You wouldn't have the healthcare industry that we have now because someone would have found a better way to do it.
The French have, and the Canadians have, and the Swedes have,
and the Brits,
and the Brits,
and the Norwegians, and the Germans, and the wait. Should we keep going? The Japanese do it pretty well. I hear the Australians have a pretty good system. Yeah.
Well, right now, our U.S. government is funding oil companies, and just this last tax season, right? We heard about Amazon paid zero taxes. All these companies paid zero taxes, $0 in taxes, and yet they're earning trillions of dollars, or billions at least in profits.
Absolutely.
And then you hear about ExxonMobil, and then they're making massive amounts of profits, and at the same time the United States government is subsidizing the oil that is causing our climate change problem. And so if you just take away the subsidies that makes the gas cheap here in the United States, then all of a sudden people are going to wonder, hey, I don't want to pay this much in gas. That's my gas bill that's going up. And
exactly.
You saw that when the economic downturn happened in 2008 and gas was at $4 a gallon. Even here in Utah, you saw that.
That's when I bought
a lot
my
of people
Prius.
on tracks.
Yeah.
A lot of people. I didn't mean to make fun of Prius people. I did a little bit, but Teslas are the new Prius. Priuses are more mainstream now.
Yeah,
Teslas are when the Prius first came out, it was a toy for rich people. They've kind of come more mainstream. The
I
Teslas
looked for
are
an
like,
electric car.
Yeah,
they didn't have them. They had $150,000.
Right, they're not in the anyway.
But yeah,
that's not where I was going with the whole thing.
Sorry.
You saw more tracks ridership. You saw smaller and fewer cars on the road, and people weren't driving their big trucks, and they weren't, I went from driving, Alan, you had a small Kia 4-door sedan, I had a truck. It was a hybrid pickup,
but
which everyone kind of looked at sideways and goes, is that really even a thing? It was, because I bought it back east. But it was still a truck. It still drank gas like crazy, even for a hybrid. Yeah. And I said, your little Kia sits in the driveway. It was a family loaner car. Someone's had a car to shop, or I needed an extra car for a day. It was there I said, give me the Kia, let the truck sit in the driveway. Because I was paying, I wasn't working far. I was living in Riverton, and I worked in Linden, which isn't that far of a drive, and it's a reverse commute, or it was at the time. Now there's no such thing as a reverse commute. But it was against the grain of traffic, so I wasn't sitting in bad traffic, and I was still spending so much money on gas. And it was sucking the gas like crazy, so we swapped cars.
We swapped, and the truck became the family.
And a lot of people did that, and then the gas prices started dropping again, and the economy kind of recovered.
And
people go, I can drive my big,
as soon as that happened,
Cadillac Escalade that gets 6 miles a gallon while towing my boat.
As soon as that happened, you saw Ford say, "Hey, look at our F-150," and you saw industry react to that and tell you can afford the gas now. Well, maybe you want to look at other values other than just can I afford the gas?
Right.
and I would think that look, we know that government can influence behavior. Okay.
Well, it does. It helps people buy SUVs.
That's right.
Right, because
that's right.
Well, they
because
just had,
of they're subsidizing the oil.
They just
Exactly.
and they just had the proposed road tax or extra fuel tax here in Utah got killed hard because any new tax. In
Well,
Utah
any
gets
taxes
killed.
in Utah, but at the legislature. But again,
That was a proposal for the people to vote on. The legislature is free at any time to meet and set a new state gas tax if they wanted to. They never will.
No, they never will.
Even though I would tell you this. If they did, people would be up in arms and screaming and yelling. Come November, 80% of those people get reelected. No
They would
problem.
all get reelected.
Because nobody will remember that last January they raised the gas tax. In November, in November they're not going to remember last January. They say, "Hey, that's my Republican representative. Yeah, I'm voting for that guy."
Yeah, he's got an R next to his name or her
Yeah,
name.
it's
Okay, check the
20% of them would get challenges and not make it through the convention because someone would say, "Hey, you remember he raised your gas tax?" And there'd be about a 20% turnover, but 80% of those people would still be there.
that's true. And so if you're looking at the ability of government to influence that kind of behavior, I mean, there's so many things that we could do that with.
You know what you need? You need the prime minister who was the prime minister of Australia, or the prime minister. No, the prime minister of Australia, who when they did their gun ban, it was very unpopular. He said, "We're pushing this through. I'm getting this done." They said, "It's going to be the end of your political career." He goes, "Great, I'll have done the one thing," and he got killed in the next election. I mean, wiped out. Republican versus Democrat style in Utah, 80-20. He got crushed, but they didn't override his law. And they still have the gun ban in Australia.
That's right. No,
he knew what was coming. You need that kind of
people of
courage and
integrity.
Integrity to
That's
say,
right.
this has to happen no matter how unpopular it is, no matter what it costs me personally. This is what's right for the society as a whole.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And that's what you have to have. And that's what we don't have.
We don't have people of integrity. We don't have people of courage. We do not have people that are willing to stand up and say, you know what, we need to do what's right. No matter what. It's a shame, but
it's kind of hard when you can't all agree on what's right.
Well,
I mean, it goes back to we're having two different if the two sides are having two different conversations. I'm talking about solving for X, and you're talking about the color blue. We're not getting very far.
Well, and that is the history of the United States. You understand? I mean, the Great Compromise at the Constitutional Convention safeguarded slavery. How is that a big compromise?
Okay, but they were at least all still talking and
all that was kicking the can down the road. How many? What was it? Lincoln said 7 years ago.
But they came to an
agreement. That's what they did. That's all they did. We came to agreement against the third party, King George. We came to agreement once we declared independence. Then we came to agreement, but
the one side was willing to kick it down the road in exchange for something.
Look,
there wasn't the hard line in the sand. They're like, well, I guess this isn't working.
Independence retained slavery, and then when we got the Constitution, we again retained slavery. We put it in the Constitution. These people are worth 3/5 of human beings, and these people are worth 0. Those were the price. The price in order to have a central government. I mean, the country's history is based on compromises that have just pushed down the road real problems.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. At least there were compromises, and no matter how small forward the country moved, the country did move forward. At this point, there is such a stalemate. The two sides aren't willing to compromise that you have that hard line. If that happened today with the, keeping slavery, look, you can keep slavery if you vote for the Constitution, and we get that never happens today. In today's political climate, there's such a hard line, and both sides will say, nope, I'm not touching it.
Part of the problem is that you need to at least have two groups that are willing to cooperate together.
Which I'm saying we don't have.
Well,
rarely. I think rarely. You don't get the big look. For all the problems and as much as we like to trash him, Orrin Hatch working with Teddy Kennedy, you don't even get that today.
Ted Kennedy. Okay, well, I think that Orrin Hatch gave that up a long time ago.
I think when Ted Kennedy died, Orrin
I don't
said, "I don't have anyone to work with anymore."
I don't. That wasn't true. I think Orrin Hatch was as much part of the problem as anybody else.
Well, I'm saying he was, but you don't get that kind of the two big statesmen who everybody recognizes whether they like him or not. Okay, so look, for the sake of our listeners, we're recording, and there was just a really big car accident on the corner, and so we stopped to look out the window, and because we heard tires squeal. Yeah, we heard tires squeal.
There's plenty of people over there
and crash and metal crunching. And so we paused it, and now we don't remember where we were. So there's going to be a hard cut here.
So let's go talk about some other things. I think the point we were trying to make. I mean, we've made a number of points about economy and about government and about the ability to work together. That's what we were really talking about. I don't know that. The problem is that if you're going to approach public service from the perspective of what's best for the public as a whole, that's one thing. If you're approaching it from what's best for the rich people who are putting money in my pocket, then that's a complete. So it's a difference between King Mosiah and the Gadianton robbers.
Yeah,
or King Benjamin.
But let's bring it to a modern time. And Matt was just saying, we were talking about things we could talk about that weren't on his initial list. But he said we could talk about Joe Biden. Who are the current Democratic candidates who have declared for 2020? Who would you put on? Look, we know what side Trump's on. He's in it for himself and his buddies, and how can I make a buck off of this? Are there any Democratic people right now who have declared for to run for president who you would put in the I want to do what's best for the country and for the people?
Warren.
Would you put Biden on that list? Would you put Warren? Would you put
Klobuchar or Harris?
Who's the mayor of South Bend?
Oh, dare you? Go ahead.
I'm not saying that name.
Pete Buttigieg?
Yeah.
Buttigieg?
Who would you put on which side?
Well, I would
just from the limited knowledge you have of what.
Sure.
Who's where?
Everybody knows, if you've listened to this podcast, that I've been a big fan of Elizabeth Warren for a long time.
Yeah.
And when she came to Salt Lake, I was in the audience and I listened to her, and I listened to her plan, and I listened to I've watched her for the last several years. I think she is a person who has the best interest of the people at heart, as opposed to corporations.
So, I think Joe Biden has a long history of service and wants to truly do what's best for the country. I don't think he's necessarily in it to,
he's not in it to advance himself necessarily.
Let me go back to Elizabeth Warren real quick, because this is a conversation, and sometimes we just go off on tangents. And this is one. This is going to be one. Her coming out and saying we should just wipe out student debt loans. Yeah. If you have a student debt, if you have a loan for going to college, we're going to wipe that away. You're going to owe zero. People are screaming on
Who's screaming?
Here's the people who are screaming. Some people are screaming because they work for or they own the companies that give the loans at ridiculous interest rates, and they don't want their industry to go away.
Exactly.
Other people are screaming on both sides. Wait, that's not fair. I worked hard and paid off my student loans. Why would these people get a free pass? What my response to that is? Tough. You know what? At some point, yes, you worked hard and you paid off your student loans. I paid off my student loans, not from working hard. I used blood money, okay? I used a settlement from my accident. But
there's a time. There's a far different things going on. You cannot compare where we are today in 2019 with where people were in the 70s and 80s and 90s.
And that's what I was going to bring up, because before we were talking before the podcast, I came over a couple hours ago and we were just playing games and stuff. We were talking about how much different, because we were talking about my daughter and her husband and how they have it different than when I had it, and how different it was when you and mom first got married and were trying to start a family and got your own places and stuff like that.
Right.
We were talking about how it's not the same game.
It is not.
You guys were playing checkers. We were playing chess. I think the kids today are playing 3D chess from Star Trek, and nobody knows how that's really done. Okay,
that's true. Yeah,
there may be some people, but it's a different game they're playing.
The world changes, and okay, so you're going to say, "Gee, I worked hard and I paid off my student loan." very good on you. Thank you for doing that. And you should be proud of that. It's a different game now, okay?
Back when people who were screaming were taking out student loans, it was cheaper to go to college. You weren't taking on $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 of debt per year, depending on the school you're going to. You didn't have the interest rates weren't, designed to keep you in that debt for your entire life.
Student loans were at 0.5%. They were artificially capped.
They were artificially capped low.
Now they're at
some guy who graduated from college in the 70s had like $8,000 in student debt total. Where that might get you a semester at some of these schools now.
If that,
it's a different game.
It's a different world.
Can't compare
and so you
apples
have to
oranges.
change. You have to change the rules.
Well, but what about the argument of, well, why didn't they go to a community college, a cheaper university? They're not being fiscally responsible by taking out that many student loans. There are arguments on the other side as well.
No, I think those arguments. There are no arguments on the other side when it comes to looking at the what is within our economy. What is the number one debt load? If you talk to bankruptcy judges, the number one debt load, and it's not dischargeable in bankruptcy, is student loans. Okay?
Yeah, student loans aren't wiped out in bankruptcy
ever. And so you have created a system. The loan industry has created a system of a generation, and it's now going on 2 or 3 generations that are stuck in a never-ending cycle. Okay, these people graduate from college. Now what more than what we paid for houses back in the day.
So why don't people, like Matt was saying, more people go to, say, Slick for 2 years, get an associate's, and then transfer?
Maybe they do.
But why don't more? I mean, why?
Look, there are plenty of
is it just
there's a devil's advocate thing to go on here. What about, why the people who go to Slick for 2 years and are able to kind of pay their way through and then transfer
They're
and have
not.
a smaller?
You follow people who go to Slick for 2 years, then they have to go to a university, and they're going to get those loans anyway. What I'm saying
You're
is
going to have half the loans. You're not going to have the full 4 years.
No, because in the meantime, prices have gone up and loan prices have gone up. The game keeps changing.
The game does keep
changing. What I'm
changing.
saying is, and you look at the way people are doing things, and you say, oh, wait a minute, I did things one way, and so everybody should do it that way. It doesn't work for everybody.
Well, and
what happened to letting people live their lives? But having a system which allows people to move up.
So the producer just sent me a text. The system's rigged at this point to keep lower class people from being able to go to college without those loans. And we keep telling people, and we're pumping this into students, and it's not wrong in the day that we live in. You have to get more than a high school education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether that's, and we've talked about this,
Whether
any
it's
kind of, a trade school, you need something past high school in order to make it today. You want to look. The world needs plumbers and welders and everything else, but you still got to go to trade school and learn those things.
Right. That's right.
And the days are past where you can just kind of open your own shop and be a printer. And you bought a printing press, and you just kind of did your own thing. Those days are pretty much gone. You need some kind of specialized training or education post high school.
Okay, let me answer as part of that too. Where the market has changed for education. So you say, what about the people who said, well, you go to cheaper schools or anything? The people that are asking the questions, they're the ones who are also running for-profit colleges. I see a huge number of people who get their education at for-profit colleges. Why? Why would you ever spend that kind of money? And so a lot of the student loans come from for-profit colleges. It's expensive enough to go to the University of Utah or to University of Michigan or to Ohio State or to Stanford or Yale or Harvard or any of those places.
I bet a lot of those people going to the for-profit colleges or universities, well, they can't get into University of Utah, Brigham Young, Ohio State, Michigan, because their grades weren't good, or they've got a learning disability that never got dealt with because there may be a lower income area and the school didn't care and the parents were both working and didn't have time to get involved in the kids' life.
So those people say, I keep hearing you say we need education. We spent 4 years on this podcast talking about how we believe that education is the way to advance in society. I can't get into but there's a college here that's telling me that I can go to their college and pay their tuition, and they will give me a trade. They will make me a paralegal. They will make me a nurse. They will make me somebody who can do X skill. And so I go to that, and I need to earn. I need to have money for my kids to live, because living is more expensive now. Even getting an apartment is more expensive now. I mean,
what about the argument that...
And so anyway, they're getting loans.
Well, they're getting loans
to get that specific degree.
You've also got like the working. I had to go. I got married. I had a kid. I had to go to work. I recognize I need, but University of Utah doesn't exactly have classes that fit my schedule. But Western Governors will let me take classes online, and they're more expensive, but it kind of fits my schedule.
Sure, there's a lot of society has changed tremendously. When my wife and I came out of the Army the first time, transferred to the reserves because it was time to go to college, we got an apartment for $100 a month. He was 1 year old. We were expecting number 2. We got an apartment for $100 a month, and I went to work. And I worked 4 hours every morning at making $2.85 an hour, and then I went to school in the afternoon, and I had an evening job. Okay. And then, after a while I got some GI Bill money because I'd already served in the Army, but things got different. The GI Bill is not as good as it used to be. They tightened down the benefits. It's not as good as it used to be. Okay. Student loans. I had student loans. By the time I got out of college, I had some student loans. I had student loans that were, in the 0.5% interest rate. Okay. What are they now? 18, 16, 18? It's almost whatever you can. It's almost whatever the market will bear.
And they'll tell you, well, that's just fair because
it's not just fair,
well, right?
That's the
whole
whole
point.
So to me, it just seems crazy to get a loan for that much money. I mean, any loan, and it just. I paid off my student loans, and so I'm in that camp, right? And so. To me, it seems like, why would I ever get a loan out for $25,000 per semester? No amount of education to me seems worth that.
Because at this point, that's what you've been taught. When you grow up and you've heard you have to go to college, you have to get a 4-year degree, if not post 4-year degree.
Well, but a 4-year degree at this college, right? Because couldn't you go to a state school in state and Southern Utah University
but if you're coming out of there with a lot of loans,
sure, but not like.
But
I hear about $150,000, $200,000 worth of loans. That's as much as my first house.
But there's also
house, exactly.
There's also the prestige. I mean, you've got. People want a big name school on their resume. I went to USC, not I went to UC Davis or UC Irvine.
Well, you get the same measles at both.
Right. Yes, it's true. And we'll get to that in a minute too.
We're running out of time.
Don't get ahead of me. There is right or wrong, and I think it's wrong. Look, you get a piece of paper, then you got a piece of paper, and that. A lot of times that's what all people care about. But you do have employers or you do have people who will tell you it matters where you went. Oh, you went to Southern Utah. That's not as good as if you went to the University of Utah. You did.
Yeah, but again.
After 2 years or 3, 4, maybe 5 years of working, nobody cares about where you went to college.
After your first assignment, after your first job, they want to know what you've done.
But an 18-year-old doesn't get that.
They don't know. Okay,
yeah,
so
I'm saying you're a 17-year-old graduating high school. You don't know that 5 years down the road, it's not going to matter.
Let me wrap this up by just saying this. Where are we today? Okay, the people that are running for public office today aren't the ones, necessarily who created. And you can always look back and say, gee, you should have made better choices. You should have made other choices.
Right.
we can all argue that we could have made better choices. Okay, maybe certain people shouldn't have children because they can't afford it. Are we willing to make that? Are we say? Let's become. Do we want to bring back into vogue the Malthusian idea that look, there are poorhouses, there are jails. If you can't afford to feed your family, maybe you ought to starve to death. I mean, my gosh, the question
thank
for
you, Ebenezer.
Right.
Well, the point is, who you're running for public office today? What are the issues today on a national level? And corporate greed and student loans and energy and the
healthcare.
So there are things you have to address.
Right.
What's your solution? And if you're running on a platform that says, my solution is screw you people. Well, why would we care about you? Why would we want to vote for you? I mean,
they voted for Trump.
They voted for Trump.
Look, I'm telling you.
But he had a very specific platform.
He told the lie better than most, I think.
But my point is, he had a very specific platform. Whether it was about Mexicans and whether it was about
Muslims.
Muslims. So
his whole thing was people different than us.
Yeah.
And by us, we're talking about people who look like me and who agree.
Yeah,
class white.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
people who are different than us are the
So
enemy.
he had a platform that enough people bought into.
Yeah.
And there were two other things going on. One is, are we ready for a woman president? I mean, I really do think that was part of the edge on the one side. And there were a lot of people who had been Bernie supporters who said, you know what? I'm not voting for her. And
they just didn't vote.
And her emails, and they just didn't vote. You get people who, so.
Well, going back to the education thing, I do think it's a radical idea. I think it's an interesting idea. And just going to another Democratic talking point, free college education. I was looking up just maybe 60 years ago or so, high school was not free, and this is something that's fairly new. And so I think perhaps the time is now, maybe a community college, 2 years of community college should be free.
Yeah.
There are states in Tennessee, any community college in Tennessee is free for in-state residents. And they're starting to open it up to out-of-state residents if you go to a community college in Tennessee. There are pockets of places doing that. I think Elizabeth Warren, wanted to grab some attention. That's a really good way to grab some attention. Is a big, bold statement like that.
But that's just one of her things.
Right.
I mean, she has, the whole consumer protection agency thing.
Right.
I mean,
but all her things, if you look at her platform, and I'm not stumping for Elizabeth Warren, I'm kind of a Biden guy right now, but it's way early to be picking sides.
Way too early. Yeah.
But if you look at all her things, I would put her in the camp of wants to do what's best for the society as a whole.
And you may not agree with everything,
right?
But I think her motivation,
or how she's trying to get there.
She's shown you how her motivation over the last 8 or 10 years has been in that camp.
But I think everything she's doing is to better people's situation. The getting rid of student debt is more leveling of the playing field. You've got lower income students who can either only go to college because they're taking out these massive loans, or they don't go, and then you got that cycle of poverty where all you're doing is working some minimum wage jobs, which is minimum wage is a whole separate discussion. I think when you've got the scandal that we have, we barely touched on it. We mentioned it was going on, but the bribery getting into college thing.
Right.
Yeah.
When you've got millionaires who are bribing their kids, getting their kids into the colleges to get the brand name college they want to go to, fundamentally, you know that there's something wrong with the system of higher education when, okay, I have to go to USC and I'm a millionaire and a famous person, but I feel like I need to do these bribes or work, cheat this system and say they're, on the rowing crew or whatever in order for them to get there, as opposed to, okay, well, USC, but what about UCLA? What was wrong with UCLA? Or, any of the other... Look,
but I think they're not a good example because
I think
there's so much more to that story.
But I think, there's so much more to that story, but I think it shows that there's such a class difference in with college education.
There is a class.
You can, if even people who can afford to send their kids at full tuition don't. They don't want to. They do everything they can to get around it. What is the poor kid from, I don't know, pick a place in Iron County who doesn't have a lot of resources, whose parents don't have a lot of resources? How is he supposed to afford going to even community college, much less
and
a bigger school?
And have a family.
Yeah.
And,
those kids can't even afford to go to Slick. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think we've always taken a position on this. My position has always been that education is a plus. Education is really mandatory. It is what
it's part of a democracy. A democracy can't survive.
Exactly.
Well, even non-democracies.
Well, true.
In this world, you can't. You can't.
We've talked about
you can't
how,
survive
how
and thrive.
Even education has
without
changed the industry. The newfangled, your industry has changed education.
Wildly, yeah.
Yeah, and so the whole idea of yes, people are gonna have to get educated.
But people in my industry who have been doing it for 20 plus years, don't have the education. I couldn't get into the industry today.
Exactly.
I couldn't. I don't have.
Exactly.
I don't have that level of education.
It keeps moving. Look, there have been sea changes, to use the phrase, and so the idea. But here's what I want to ask the people that say, "Well, I did it my way, and that was good enough for me," or "I succeeded in my day, and so they should be."
You know what? You're the old guy yelling, "Get off my lawn!" Don't begrudge somebody something because you didn't get it.
Or because you got it
I'm
a different
sorry
way.
you didn't have email when you were a kid and you had to send letters through the post office. That doesn't mean that email is a bad thing.
That's not fair.
You know what?
The argument about it's not fair. The argument about it's not fair.
This whole thing started because the people complaining that they didn't.
Sure.
Don't begrudge somebody something because you didn't get it. You're not 5-year-old twins and one got an ice cream cone and one didn't. Okay?
Things are different.
Things move, things change.
Every generation, things are different.
Be glad that there's somebody who's trying to help these kids,
and
as opposed to just
the idea
being a grouch about it.
The response is that we need to look at where things are today and take the stumbling blocks away from people today.
Yeah.
You probably had
that's government's job, is to remove the stumbling blocks.
That would
what?
So.
If you have the drive and the ambition and the work ethic and the whatever else you need to go to school and do these, great, but remove the stumbling blocks and at least level that playing field a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we've gone way too long. See, this is what happens when we go on tangents.
This is what happens. Way to go, Matt. You got us
All
going.
Right.
So,
what's left?
Well, there's a couple things left, and I don't think we have time to do them. How do we talk to Republicans in the age of misinformation and Fox News? We've kind of talked about that before. We've kind of talked about that today.
I read an article.
You've got to all be on the same page and be talking about. You've got to be having the same conversation, right? And we've kind of mentioned that. We talked about it when we were talking about climate change. We've all got to be talking. If we're going to talk colors, you can talk blue, I can talk yellow. But if you're going to talk yellow and I'm going to say 13, we're not talking the same things. We got to at least still be on the same, in this, you can't be talking about the NFL draft and I'm talking about the Cubs hitting home runs last night.
Right.
So the lack of.
So here's interesting. I was reading this book, God, Justice, and Society, and I don't know if I've mentioned it before. It looks at aspects of law and legality in the Bible, and this chapter was on the trial of Jesus. Okay, it happens to just be around Easter, and so it was an interesting thing, and the idea that you would remain silent in the face of an untruth, and this is what you were just talking about, and so this author talks about, as a matter, and this is the quote, because people think that if you remain silent, then that is your right. You have the right to remain silent. But what if the right to remain silent, or what if you choosing to remain silent actually harms you and actually allows the falsehood to be perpetrated and to be continued to be perpetrated? And this is what he says, which I love this quote. As a matter of substantive social knowledge, silence is interpreted as agreement, right? If you don't speak against something, you must be in agreement with it and with having something to hide. If you if you're not bringing forward your tax returns, you obviously probably have something to hide in your tax return. For this reason, in miscarriage of justice cases, and remember he's talking here in terms of the trial of Jesus, but I think it has social implications in just a general political discourse. In miscarriage of justice, it is important not to remain silent in the face of false allegations, and it is important to construct a defense. All that is needed for a wrongful conviction is circumstantial evidence. And so if you're accused of an imaginary crime allegedly committed on an unspecified date years ago, and then of course it's virtually impossible to defend yourself, people assume guilt following the silence of the accused. If you don't speak up against the falsehood perpetrated by Trump, if you don't speak up against the falsehood of your neighborhood right-wing radical who stands up in Sunday school and who says, well, the Mexicans have invaded us and the Book of Mormon says we get to defend ourselves. If you don't speak up against that radical falsehood, then people in the room say, yeah, that's right. Because nobody's going to stand up unless you're going to stand. I mean, and the whole immigration thing is, you have to remind people that the Book of Mormon says everybody's welcomed here. Okay? If God brings you to this continent, then it's because he wants you here. And there's nothing in the Book of Mormon about visas. So I think we have to speak up in favor of, or we have to speak up against the truth, against falsehood. We have to speak up in favor of truth, because if we don't respond, then we're allowing the falsehood to be perpetrated. So when your Republican friend says, well, Obama says Obama did this and did that. No, he did not. And you don't even have any evidence to support that, other than you've been watching too much Fox News. The fact is, and then you lay out some facts. Now you're not gonna get that guy to accept you, no matter what. But you're gonna get the rest of the room listening, and the rest of the room will leave not thinking that Obama did something which they're claiming he did when he didn't. And so you have to keep putting out correct information and correcting the falsehood. I don't think you're ever going to get to that guy who really is convinced that Obama, ruined America. Right. But by you standing up and saying, no, he didn't. No, he was not. No, he did not rule like this guy does with just all sorts of ridiculous edicts. And they'll say, well, what about Obamacare? Obamacare was passed by 2 houses of Congress who voted into law
and upheld by the
Supreme Court. So don't come around and give me the same crap about, there is an equivalence between what Trump is doing here and what Obama did. No, there is not. And you have to stand up, and and like I say, you're never going to convince that one guy who's got the MAGA hat on. But the rest of the room is going to say, wait a minute. Yeah, I think that's, and that's how you respond.
So you're not talking to the person. You're talking to everybody. You're talking really to the rest of the room. You're talking to everyone else.
And here's what I say. A third of the spirits in the pre-existence voted down the plan of salvation and voted with their feet and left. A third, right, is what we're taught, rejected the plan of salvation. You couldn't go to one of those guys. You couldn't go to Lucifer and say, dude, this is a good idea. Mercy and all that stuff you were never going to turn Lucifer. You were never going to turn the people that were in his camp. But there was
the people who were on the fence.
There were 3 parts. Okay, we know there were 3 parts to that populace. There were those who supported the plan. There was those who were categorically opposed to the plan, and they lied about it from day one. And you're never going to convince those. But it's that middle third, that it's the people in the room that are listening to that stuff.
It's your 20 independents.
Yeah, it's my 20 independents. It's a 20. It's so
it's the 20 independents that we're talking about.
In this room years ago, we had people sit on this couch, sit there on the couch, and tell your mom and I that Obama was going to make them take a pill to die because they were old people. And they'd heard about the death panels. And we sat there and said, no, nobody's going to force you to take a pill and die. And we, and they went away, and thank goodness there were no death panels. The point is, you have to talk to the people. You're not going to convince the people that are the true believers, but you're going to convince that middle third. It's the people in the room that you want to talk to. Yeah.
All right. So there's one other topic that I was going to bring up, and I don't think we have time. Maybe we'll touch on it next week.
There's a next week? There's always...
There is a next week, and then there's not a week, and then there's a final episode. We're kind of all over the place in May. There is a next week. But, so Matt's last question, where do people like him go for content like this once we're gone?
That hurts.
That was his email, man, not mine.
So I've got, so here's the thing. Here's where I'm coming from. When I decided to leave the Republican Party officially, and then after Trump got elected, I, as more than half of America were completely saddened. I started a blog, millcreekdemocrat.com, and I was like, I'm going to push forward and do all this other stuff, and then and speak up on Facebook more than I ever have, and I've never been one to speak up. I mean, in this podcast itself, I like listening to these conversations. I don't usually like to participate, but I felt compelled to, and I really loved this conversation, you and Alan and Anarchy every once in a while joining, and where should we go? And I've written a few posts on MormonPress.com, and that's a good place to go. But what are some other sources? What do you guys think?
Oh, we may be the wrong people to ask this. We spun off from another group for a reason. And those who listen to the early days of the podcast know, but I'm not going to go into it right now. But Mormon Press. Look, the internet's full of anything you can find, anything you want to find, you can find it.
Sure, yeah.
I think locally, LDS Dems, now Latter-day Saint Dems, they're more focused on the legislative. They're working with the legislature and trying to do more lobbying than they are talking to people and kind of bringing a community together. And they've kind of switched gears. A producer's holding up a sign, start your own. So someone can start my own podcast. Someone can pick up where we're leaving off.
Recruit Anarchy, and we can.
That would be awesome. Maybe we keep it going, but you and Anarchy become the voice of the podcast. I think we did this because we felt we needed to. When I ran for public office, we sat in this room. There used to be a big long table in this room. We sat with my campaign staff around here, and we had, look, here are our positions and why we have them. And we read the Book of Mormon. I said, okay, environment, and we showed where in the scriptures you got support for, taking care of the environment. Education, where in the scriptures you get support for education. Where in the scriptures you get support for a laissez-faire government or a government that allows people who don't believe like us, and we went through that exercise, and there were people. We had a couple of kids on the campaign staff from the U of U that we got through the political science, and they weren't Latter-day Saints, and it was kind of an eye-opening thing for them. And they said, I've never heard of anybody doing that. And so, then when things begin to happen, and we decided, okay, I got tired of the internal politics of a party, and so kind of wanted to get away from that. We wanted to have an impact on people. We wanted to continue to talk. We came up with this, and it was primarily our producer's idea that we talk. Other people can talk. Other people can rise up and step up next. You can go back and you can listen to 4 years worth of podcasts, and to me, it seems to me that we're just repeating ourselves at this point.
Sure.
Because we've been talking about these same topics for 4 years, and so that's why the time came, I think, for us to say, all right, we've had a good run, and we've kind of but there are other people who have talked about these issues and who have ideas about how we can influence our neighbors, how we can influence, how we can advance a more liberal thinking ideas. But I don't know specifically where.
Sure.
Some people might go to one group or another. Or
yeah, there's no other groups right now that I'm following currently. That There are some groups that aren't specifically left-wing or democratic. The Mormon Women for Ethical Government, I think, kind of...
That's not a bad group.
They're not a bad group.
No,
they're not a
group.
democratic
really
group,
good
but
ideas.
they're kind of, So there are places to go. If people want to keep talking or whatever, they can. Anyway, we are way over time for what we usually do. So, Matt, thanks.
So interesting to talk to. It's been really fun. Thanks, you guys.
Sorry
glad
that
you
you
came.
you saw the sausage get made. And this was actually one of our more normal ones, with not too many stops or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah. Thanks, Marlo, for inviting me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Anyway, we said at the beginning, I'm going to remind people there's only 2 episodes left after this. If you want to comment, if you want to ask us questions, if you want to yell at us and scream at us, if you want to, whatever, you can email us, latterdayleft@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Latter Day Left, and you can find us on Twitter @LatterDayLeft. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Have a good week.
This week's episode was produced and edited by Marlo Balmanno, and our theme music is a selection from Tate Peterson's Midday Blues. Don't forget, if you want to contact us, please email us at latterdayleft@gmail.com or find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Pause. We're back in 3, 2, 1. We're back again. And that'll make the next blooper reel. We're back again in 3, 2, 1.